and people are wondering about how that may affect them going down the next few months and what have you. Making sure that if you haven't gone through the pricing optimization in your studio, to make sure you do so sooner than later. Basically, whether it's increasing some of your prices, but also funneling things to reoccurring membership, and making sure all your processes and communications around your pricing are set up so that everybody's fully aware of the direction of your studio, and also, providing them all the information they need to sort of maximize their practice at your studio and make sure that their questions are fully answered. So, I think sometimes going into difficult times in the economy, if your business isn't structured with your staff or your pricing or your email drip campaign and what have you, and you're chasing yourself in, to get ahead of that while the recession is hitting, it can be difficult. So I think it's a good time now, if you haven't already started the process, to finalize that optimization so that you feel really solid going into a difficult time in the economy.
Yeah, well said. I think obviously recession is something that people are feeling nervous about. We're already there, actually. So it's not like this looming thing that's coming. We're already there right now. And the reason I say that is sometimes it's alleviating to just realize that, like, we don't have to hold our breath for some big negative shoe to drop. Like, we're already in it, sort of thing. So, but to your specific point on pricing, I think this is a conversation that comes up often and has come up for quite some time in the YC. And I think that pricing is the fastest way for you to manipulate margin on the per person basis. So it's not about just raising prices necessarily, as it is about, I would call it like optimizing your pricing so that it makes sense for your business. So you can just raise prices across the board, but it's also like looking at, historical members, or looking at what pricing options you have and how do they set up your business for success in terms of, are they easy to sell? Are they good margin on a per class basis? Do they increase lifetime value? Is it easy to resell? Do they create cash flow, etc.? So I think getting a little more creative with pricing options is something that is going to be important in the next while.
And to your point, I think parallel to like the fundamentals of your business and making sure your pricing works for your house, your studio, is also recognizing what's going on in your community with respect to how pricing is affecting the pricing of gas and food and rent and everything is affecting your community as a whole. And yoga can be a great opportunity to really increase your touches in an authentic way, to be sensitive to your community and provide them the practice that can relieve the tension of life, right? So doing your pricing correctly really serves the individual, but at the same time, it can be a great opportunity to check in with your community, like really increase those touches and listen to the stories that people are challenged by and show up for them in class.
Well said. And I would just add to that if we look back through other economic downturn times, the industry that always comes out of it, like, first off, weathers the storm, so to speak, well, and then comes out on top, is fitness, and especially boutique fitness and wellness like yoga does well during those times. So I'm just saying that because we have to have a positive narrative, I think, around this as well. Question, Alex, maybe you can speak to, and then Teresa as well. I know you've got your hand up there too. This question did come in, like, okay, what about lowering our prices? If everything else is going up and it's hard and like affordability is where people are sensitive, someone straight asked the question, like, should I lower some prices? What do you guys think about that?
High level, I think one can do that. Like, if you look at your business and your fixed costs, your annual fixed costs, and it makes sense for your business. In other words, you can afford to do so. You can continue to pay your teachers what they need to be paid. You can, your lease is such that you can do so. Maybe for your membership, it's a possibility. I wouldn't necessarily just react to it and lower my prices without a full evaluation. You want to know why you're doing it, and if your business can do it. Because if you can't do it, if the numbers tell you can't, then in 12 months from now, you'll get caught with, for sure. That would be my thought.
Teresa, go ahead there.
I had a comment before you asked that question, but I would agree with Alex. That I know that a lot of the businesses that I work with, it wouldn't make sense financially for them to lower. So you do have to be in a really safe spot. Just a quick answer that question, since we were on that vein. But going back just a little bit to, getting through a rough spot and having yoga to lean on to help you, kind of goes back to community. I think we talked about this in a roundup recently, but the stronger you can make your community, the more you can help people through a rough time. And we've also talked about the trend that people are looking for experiences, right? And so really leaning into that too can help in times like this. So, these experiences can help build community, and then community can make be really helpful for people during times like this. And I know I had a client recently that did a special like social event. It was just a Wednesday evening, and they did it after their Wednesday evening class. So the deal was come to the Wednesday evening class, the last class of the day, and then stay. And they did have alcohol. They had martinis. So, that's always enticing. But they had the class is a class that was struggling. And so it got really nice exposure for that instructor. And I think typically there's like 7 people in that class or something. And they had like 28 people and 8 new people, eight people that were totally new to the studio. So it built community with the existing members and clients, but then also brought in new ones. And so then they're getting to socialize with each other more than they would just before or after a class for 10 minutes. So.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, the community is such a huge value piece of the puzzle. And I like what Alex, both you and Teresa were saying about lowering prices too, just that it has to fit in the business, but also more importantly, why? Like what's your actual purpose with that? As you were saying that, it was making me think the reason to have a lower price is because it increases volume. So if you can't prove for sure that it's going to increase volume, then why? Like you have to be absolutely sure that that's the thing that's going to make that happen. And I think in most cases, that's not probably how it's going to play out. Go ahead there, Terry.
Just a couple of thoughts on this and the lowering prices. It's an interesting thought in terms of, like you said, is it increased volume? So if your capacity is running like less than 50, like in the 30s percentage or so, that could be a strategy to increase the volume. But it's like, what prices are you lowering, right? And I think that it's all about, again, going back to price optimization. And just on that front, I want to say, raise your drop-in. I think right now, this is my whole thing. I'm hashtag raise your drop-in. I preach this all the time. It's like, make your drop-in the most expensive thing. I have a client whose drop-in is $40. Right now, granted, he's in California, but still, it's a drop-in. And then that's, I think, the very beginning of your price optimization. And then you're optimizing for maybe that 5-pack, or the obviously ultimate holy grail is the membership. So it's like, if you're thinking of maybe adjusting my prices one way, don't lower your drop-in. If anything, increase your drop-in. And then the other thing just recently, I know with some clients, is not operating from a position of fear if you need to optimize your pricing. And one of the big buckets that I've been working with several of my clients on is the clients that have been with them like pre-pandemic, the ones that stuck with them and they're on an older price plan, a membership that's maybe sometimes $20 to $30 less a month than their current membership price, and working a strategy to bring those people to parity with their current pricing structure and not being afraid to do that. And then the couple of cases where I've worked with clients doing that, yeah, they had one or two people that were canceled, that did cancel, like, I'm just not using it enough. And there is that. However, by and large, it's been very positively received, and it's all in how you position it. So in one case, a client added in the VOD and live stream was a separate membership. And so we just decided, okay, we're going to bring the price up to the current level. And then as an additional perk of membership, they layered in. It was like no big deal to them, no skin off their nose, to have the VOD and live stream as part of the regular membership. And that ended up being a really, really positive thing for this particular client. And the other thing, maybe you throw in a couple extra buddy passes. So if you are going to bring them up to like on par with where you're at, maybe there's some things that you can do to add a little bit more value to the membership. And also, I just say, don't apologize that you're raising your prices. You don't want to start the email with, we're so sorry, that you've been such a loyal member. We're sorry we have to raise our price. No bueno, right? Make it like, we're bringing our prices up to current market rates. This is all the things you get. This is effective with your blank payment. Simple, easy, not apologizing. It doesn't need to be lengthy. It doesn't need to be like a 15 paragraph email as to why you're doing it. You're doing it because you have to do it. Simple as that.
I like that statement of confidence. Don't come from fear in there as well. One thing when you're talking about raising the single class as well, when we talk about raising prices, the other way to look at this is increase the average dollars that someone pays for class. So when you raise like a membership price, that effectively does that. But what sometimes happens is then someone says, well, I'm not using it enough, so it doesn't warrant me paying the higher price that you're pushing this to. But then you just move them to something else, like a 10-pack, which makes them more comfortable. And effectively, you still raise the price when you look at it on a per class basis, because the person had previously been paying $10 a class, and now they're paying $16 a class or something like that. So that's the other place to make your calculation, or where to like zoom in and look for your calculation, dollars per person per class as well, I would say. Jump in there, Vicky.
So I was thinking, like, instead of lowering your prices, there could be an opportunity to just sell things that are cheaper for less money in this market. So I've had to do this for my own studio because for various reasons, I can't have packages that last for a really long time. So instead of selling a 10-pack, I started selling a 5-pack. Now, it's the same price per class as buying a 10-pack, but it's less money. It's half the price of the 10-pack, and it lasts half as long. And this is going really well. Also, I used to always around Black Friday, or not always, but most Black Fridays, I've sold something of a super pass. Now, I can't do that. It can't be that long. So I've made it a 7-month pass, and I'm saying that it's to celebrate our 7th anniversary, but it's only 7 months. So it's less money. It's actually kind of more per class or per month than the super pass used to be, but it's less total money. So this is something that could be okay for other studios too. But I would say, like, just reiterating Terry's point, the membership is usually the goal. Like, that's usually the holy grail. That's where we want to funnel people towards. So I would only recommend this when you've already optimized everything to push people to a membership. So you have that recurring money coming in. When you've optimized all of that, there could be an opportunity to sell a little bit more when you have smaller packs. I've never said this in the past. In fact, like, I've recommended many studios to stop selling the 5-pack and at least sell the 10-pack to just get a little bit more commitment, more money. But I don't know. I'm not so sure about that anymore. I'm thinking this could be an opportunity.
I agree. I think the total dollars out of pocket is how a consumer feels the spend. So if something is very concrete, like, I know exactly what I'm getting, so there's less performance anxiety. When I buy an unlimited monthly, even though it's the best deal if I practice twice a week, you're forcing me to psychologically commit to a 2-day-a-week practice to get the value out of what I pay. If I buy 5 classes that it can use in 6 months, like, I just have to get 5 classes in, like, I can do that. So it's more concrete in my mind. And then even if the dollars per class is nowhere near as good of a deal, the total dollars out of my pocket right now today is less. And that for some people makes a difference. So it kind of goes to just, in the end, sell them something and just realize, like, consumers change and the market changes. That doesn't mean we don't sell something. If you're having trouble selling your passes, I feel like there's only 3 possibilities. Possibility 1 is, and it's probably the strongest one, you don't have a strong offer. Like your offer isn't a no-brainer. It doesn't feel super compelling to buy whatever you're selling. 2 is your sales process isn't there. So different conversation. And then 3 is your product sucks. And that's the one that punches you in the stomach. But people come to yoga classes and then refuse to buy from you. Something's amiss. But that's the quick audit. But the first one being have an offer that's compelling, have an offer that for every, avatar in your business, it's a no-brainer to say yes and kind of sign on. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I was thinking, circling back to what Teresa said about the Wednesday night class that you said your client offered and what have you, unusual events create, the paradigm shift as an owner of a studio or leader of a business is that unusual events create unusual opportunities. And so a lot of our formula is based on a certain steady market, right? And some of the different things that we bring as coaches to the YC is sort of a formula of a process for success. But when the ground changes, right, instead of having that negative thought process as a leader, is look for different unique opportunities because and change your mindset, challenge yourself to look outside the box. Even if you've been doing something that's been working for 18 months really well, there could be unique opportunities. So both you guys, all of you guys spoke to that kind of thing. And so, I would just, it's like weather events, unusual events create, unusual, especially like in snowpack or whatever. I'm thinking about avalanches and whatever, but it's true with the business world too. And the people that come out on top are the ones that can think outside the box, challenge themselves, look at other businesses to see what they're doing outside of the yoga world, and so integrate them into your space, like unique offerings.
Yeah, I like that. I think we're sort of alluding to, you're expanding your pass options is what Vicky's referring to. And what Alex and Teresa are bringing up is, in terms of building that community and being this source of positive escape and whatever for people. One of the ways to increase, because when we're looking at how do we increase lifetime value, because that's another way you could look at this. So lifetime value being, if on average, when you get a client, they end up spending $500 of your business versus they spend $1,000, then the higher $1,000 per person lifetime value, that's really how you build up bigger business and margin, to increase the lifetime value. But so then the question is, how do you do that? And you can increase prices, decrease cost. You can increase purchase frequency is another one of the 6 ways that we do it. And so when you have these more community-based events, they create this opportunity for more purchase. And purchase doesn't necessarily in every instance have to be financial purchase as well. It can just be attention and participation. In a lot of the free coaching calls for people who are interested in coming on coaching that I've been doing in the last weeks, that conversation has come up a lot where we've said, we've sort of articulated that just right now, the most valuable commodity is attention from people. So when we're looking at it from the perspective of what we're talking about today with recession, one of the questions could be not how do I weather the storm of this, or how do I make more money, or how do my prices, but how do I maintain attention from everyone? Because if I'm going to your Wednesday night martini class and I'm participating with your Saturday workshop and I practice 2 days a week and I feel good, I'm going to keep doing stuff in your business, which ultimately results in me buying something from you or continuing to pay for membership. So in the end, can you hold their attention is actually a really powerful way to make sure that you're strong through the next while. That goes back to this gut punch idea that if a recession comes, well, we're in a recession, but as a recession is here and as it amplifies in some ways, and gas is more expensive and milk is more expensive, and people are taking a look at their bills and sort of restricting their spending, are you on the restricted spending list or are you on the this is part of my life list? And that goes back to that attention and the community and everything that you guys are talking about, Alex and Teresa, too, that if people are all canceling and they're suddenly, recession, I don't have money for this anymore, that means we've missed something in integrating them into the community and prioritizing their yoga practice in their life. Go ahead, Alex.
And the other thing too is whatever you choose to do now, the couple things come to mind. Just because you implement more 5-class packs or 5-class packs for a period of time. Doesn't mean it has to be there forever. And the other thing is, whatever you implement now should be part of a larger plan. So the precedent that you set with a pricing or an offer or a limitation or an opportunity, it should be part of a plan to move towards getting out of the recession, right? So it should fit in the whole picture. It shouldn't just be a reaction choice, right?
Well said.
Yeah.
Totally. With that note, one of the things I was going to put on the table to sort of keep our conversation moving a bit is strategy itself isn't hard. I think there's been a lot of, at the summit, we're talking a lot of strategy and stuff, which is good. The annual Visionary Summit will do this event every year. We have done it every year, but I think it'll be more specifically for this purpose of like planning. So if you missed it this year, make sure you're on the RSVP list in the events in the Mighty Network here, because you'll be the first ones to get dibs when we launch the second one next year, which, by the way, like that'll be soon. That's going to be in the next month or something. We've got the dates. We're just negotiating with the place on some of the finer details to solidify it. But strategy isn't the hard part. Where entrepreneurs fail is in execution. And we know this. It's the idea that knowledge isn't power. Knowledge put into action is power. The difference between professionals and the amateurs is your ability to take action. The discipline to stick to your plan. So like to come up with a plan, like Alex is saying, look at the bigger picture and then really stick to it and not get distracted. That's actually one of the hardest parts. The other way to say this is the biggest risk in your business is not delivering on your promise. So as long as you can deliver what you say you're going to deliver, then you're going to hold people's attention. They're going to pay for things. And part of that promise is you just have options. You find a way, because in the end, someone's going to practice with you and stay with you through recession and everything else because of the value that you're offering them. And then everything else is just the technical details. The example being, I don't want to buy the membership and I don't have enough money for a 20-pack. Cool, let's sell you a 5. Like that's just a technical detail. It doesn't matter. Just keep them practicing with you and doing something.
Josh, what would be for listeners? What would be a good example of like a situation in which studios are not fulfilling their promise, right? Because I think it's hard for us as studio owners sometimes to be objective, and we feel like we are offering it. But what's an example where you've seen people not offer it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think there's 2 layers that we would commonly encounter in a yoga studio. Layer 1 is more on the business side. The promise being that like we have a community and that we're like nurturing the community and doing stuff for the community and participating locally. But then when we actually look at it, it's like we send out emails to them. Do we actually have a community that there's conversation about things? Do we actually have a community where there are these other events? Do we actually have a community where we're going out into the local community and participating in some way? So that might be one example of it. And on the backside, where it's like, if we say we have the best yoga teachers, that would be another one. Well, okay, why do you have the best yoga teachers? Like, what's the continuing education program that you have? How trained are the teachers? How many hours of training do they have? How often do they meet? When are they working on drills for themselves? What about their own personal practice? And very often we say, we've got the best teachers. They're really great. They're so awesome. We have the best teachers ever, best teachers in town, best teachers, best teachers. But then when we look at it critically, it's like, well, you've got some good teachers who are on board with your program, but like you have no program or anything in place to make the teachers the best. So is that true? So those are subtle things.
So
that's sort of one,
right?
Yeah. So that's sort of one side. But then I think the other side is, when we're selling someone, like really selling, if I'm selling Terry on coming to practice hot yoga at my studio at Nomad Yoga Studio, and I'm really selling like the idea of doing OG hot yoga class, hot yin class, hot vinyasa class, they have these different purposes. This is what they give you. You're going to leave feeling like this. The question is, how often do we audit that and make sure that it's actually happening with consistency? Like, not my opinion, but Terry as the person that I've sold on, when you come and do this OG hot yoga class, we're going to move through every muscle, ligament, tendon, organ, gland. You're going to leave feeling like this. Like, is that happening? Would Terry say that to someone else? And that's a hard thing, because it's not something that we can, look at in some quantitative way necessarily. It's an opinionated thing, but to the best of your ability, delivering on your promise. So to back it up, the best example, and I heard this on a podcast recently talking about the same subject, actually, because this is not a new subject in entrepreneurship, but an important one. The example would be if you own a clothes cleaning business, like a laundromat or a what's it called? Dry cleaners, right? If you think about how do you make that business successful over the long run, like really powerful, basically, if you can promise your clothes will guaranteed be clean and guaranteed be done on time. That's it. That's the only two promises your business has. And then you actually deliver that like 99% of the time. You're on time always, and the clothes are actually clean, your business would grow. That's it. So it's a simplistic example. How do you look at a yoga studio that way? If your classes start on time and the promise of what the class is actually delivered, so like there's a certain guarantee of product quality, then people will be attracted to that and that will grow. Where I see it being tricky in yoga studios is we're selling the concept of yoga, but then when we actually look at the product in terms of product being the whole experience, that's what Teresa was bringing up too, the whole yoga experience. When I walk in, how I'm greeted, who's at the desk, how I sign in, but then the class itself as well and what happens in that, the follow-up afterwards, the cleanliness of the change room, all of that stuff. Is that really consistently being delivered to your promise? And often there's some gaps there. You teach a vinyasa class and I teach a vinyasa class. On paper, they're supposed to be the same class. They're nowhere near the same class. We don't do anything even close to the same. And I'm saying they have to be identical classes. We want the variety of flavor and tone and differential of expertise in the teachers. But just if I'm going into a class thinking it's going to be X, Y, Z, and I get something else, that's where the problem potentially comes in. Yeah. So the reason I was thinking this is a good point, when we're talking about recession, we're talking about pricing, we're talking about what do you do? Like in the end, make a strong promise and then deliver it. It's kind of that simple, which isn't a new concept for like what we're trying to do in a yoga studio anyways, but it's like now more than ever because the value proposition has to be there. Terry can't think, man, gas is expensive, I better cancel my yoga membership. Like that should be totally disassociated. She can think, I better walk to yoga, but I'm still going to make it there.
Yeah, and to your point, it's kind of like you're auditing your pricing, right, for optimization, what have you, but you're auditing your service. And
yes,
and it's a big deal. Like your point is when somebody's at home thinking about going to yoga class at 4 o'clock, they look at the schedule or they plan for the specific class, the style of yoga that they choose to, and then when they take the class, there's a big discrepancy between their expectation and their experience. And so it does become a problem. You know, if that happens 10% of the time at your studio because of the different types of teachers and approaches, that's one thing. But if it's happening 30 and 45% of the time, the next week when they look at the schedule to go to a class, they're thinking to themselves, well, I don't know, and it wasn't quite keen on my experience last week. And so being more consistent to your messaging on your website or your class description and more cohesiveness between your teachers as far as their delivery, right?
Yeah. One thing to think about is not that you have to practically do this, but if you had to put a guarantee, we guarantee X, what would that be? And for me, that helps to reframe, like we guarantee that this is going to happen when you practice with us. Then it sort of helps you, and I'm saying that from more of the auditing standpoint that you're bringing up, Alex, like that helps you sort of figure out, if I had to say there's a guarantee, like what would that be? And then that's the thing that you have to get your whole team delivering on really consistently. The side story that I can share is, I've told this versions of this a few times, but that's actually one of my hiccups here in Cellulita practicing. I practice every week, but not every day. And I aspire to practice every day, but I'm really not compelled to. Partly the schedule is not good. for people who actually work. It's like spa yoga schedule. But the other part of it is it's happened to me multiple times where I will rearrange my schedule and make sure everything's taken care of. And I'm like, I want to take this yoga class. And I specifically choose the teacher that I know that I like, the one or two teachers. So I'm like, okay, Mandy's teaching. I know it's going to be, it's a vinyasa. It's called on the schedule, Power Vinyasa Flow. Like, I know I'm going to sweat. I know we're going to do that. Like, that's the class that I want to go take. And then I get there and it's a different teacher and they teach a slow flow / restorative class. And they always start 15 minutes late and ends 30 minutes after that. So then they're like, well, if you need, you can just get up and leave early. Like, and that's their solution. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense, because what you're saying is now I have to think about time the entire time I'm practicing and have my phone next to my mat the entire time I'm practicing to pay attention to the time. And then I have to be the awkward, weird person that walks out in the middle of the class because you go over. Like, that's bullshit. So the inconsistency and the risk that's happened, you're right. It doesn't happen all the time, but to Alex's point, it happens 30% of the time here. It happens enough that I look at the schedule and go, it's too risky for me to go take this yoga class. I'll just go to the gym instead or go do something else.
Yeah. And so maybe it's a good time while you're doing the auditing of your classes and your messaging is to also look at your teacher ambassadors that are really on point with your brand, and then utilizing those teachers to help the other teachers understand why their success is. Because it's not always readily understood. Like, if one teacher is not quite as successful and the other one is, maybe the teachers can help each other, or you can help define why they're successful, whether it's their connections or they're always putting in little challenges in their classes. They have themes that move week to week, whatever it is. And you can elevate your whole teacher base as a whole, right? And as an owner, one thing, for all the owners listening, is that you don't always have to be the best teacher. I think everyone knows that, but sometimes you might put that pressure on yourself. And it's good to find those wonderful teachers in your community that can help align the whole space with your brand and your intent behind those classes.
100%.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Alex. You mentioned like strategic planning, looking at the bigger picture and like making a plan. So actually, I thought that was a good segue to little drop here. We do have coming up in only a few weeks a special, do we have a name for it yet? We were saying before, I don't even know what the name is. We have a special planning day. It's going to be a one-day event.
I like planning day. That's what it is. It's
Yeah, I just wanted to say that having been at the summit and going through this planning process with everyone who took part, it was just amazing to see how much they managed to do in such a short time, and not just the big time sort of the overview planning, but we got all the way into not just strategy but also tactics. And several of the studio owners who were there got down as granular as making to-do lists for every single thing that they planned out, and also planning them in their calendar. This week, this is going to happen. It's going to consist of this person doing this, and this task. The next week, this person is going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. It was all there. Like, all they needed was to go back and plug that in to their system at home. And I think this calendar, this planning workshop or a marketing workshop that we're doing, I'm hoping that it's going to help people get that granular with it. Because that is really powerful. And right now is such a good time for doing that, because I was thinking before we came on here today, like, what's happening right now, what are like the big plans for right now? One thing I thought was Black Friday is coming up, so you better have that sorted because that's in a week. Two, if you're doing an open house in January, and January is a really good time to do that because you should market when you're busy so you don't get slow, you should start to plan that out right now as well, and then have the year planned out, like your events, at least like a big picture planned out. So right now is when you do that, before we get to Christmas, before you get really busy with family and stuff, have that planned out so that it's really easy to just jump into January.
I love that. And I would say with this planning stuff, the thing that always comes to mind, and this was a huge subject at the summit as well, is planning, getting organized to be able to plan, and then having the planning day and whatever. It almost sounds like it's more work when you look at it at first, especially if you haven't done it before, but you have to look at it over a larger time horizon. You look at it over a year. So let's zoom in on the marketing concept. You don't want to get to Q2 and then be like, what are we doing for marketing this quarter? Or like very often, like this month, oh shoot, St. Patrick's Day is coming up. I guess let's wear green. Like that's where, and then you put out one email and like a post on Facebook or something like that. That's fine if you need to do that. But the reason that happens generally is because the lack of the plan makes you spend a bunch of effort, time, and burn mental calories coming up with what you're going to do. And those are the things that they're kind of fun, like the brainstorm part of it. So we don't usually equate them to lost time in the moment. But what we see is that when we operate that way, it adds a layer of stress because we come up with this great idea, but then this ties into the promise and everything else that we're talking about too. We're like, cool, let's make this great event. But then when you start like going a couple layers deeper and you figure out like what would have to be done and when would it have to be launched and how many people would have to be involved and what's the organization around it, et cetera, then you realize, holy shit, this is actually a lot of work. And now it feels really big and stressful. And then you either half-ass it or don't do it at all. So that doesn't have to be like that. If the event's planned 6 months in advance, and then you have in your calendar 3 months in advance to start working on it, like in theory, you're working 3 months in front of where you actually are in time in a perfect world. It's not always going to happen exactly like that, but that's when you're at least starting it. That's how you have the capacity to produce more. So when you see a studio or a studio owner or a business, you're like, wow, they really do a lot and they really do a good job and all these things. And how do they do that? It's because they're not doing it on the fly or in real time. It's planned out ahead of time.
And part of that is when you get your event calendar is having like the SOP to do the event. So it's like you do the event, whatever the event is, it's like, this is when this Teresa talked about that on her webinar earlier this year, is at this point, this is where this email goes out 3 weeks before. So you have the timetable already in place. It's like, okay, we're going to have this event in February. Okay, here we know, okay, we have to put up on the website on this date. And so that's part of that, having that plan. And I'm just throwing these two great ideas out there right now. I'll mention them on the 5th as well. But two things that were wildly popular at my studio was Groundhog Day and National Watermelon Day. Right? Because oftentimes I throw that out there just because
that just makes sense.
It does. Doesn't it make sense? Well, because everybody's like Valentine's Day. And for me personally, just Valentine's Day is just like, please, really, I'm sorry. I'm just like a negative Nelly when it comes to Valentine's Day. Maybe that's because my heart is just like been stapled so many times. I can't handle it. I don't know. But anyway, I was always like, let's do something besides the standard, right? So Groundhog Day was fun in February. And then other times of the year, National Watermelon Day is August 3rd. So looking for some fun events that you can do in like off-peak times. Everybody does 4th of July. Everybody does Mother's Day, those standard ones. But again, to get some excitement in the community is just Google wacky holidays and find like National Popcorn Day or this day, or, so you can do some really low level events that are just fun. And I love the whole thing with the martinis, right? That's a great idea. So, you can tie some of those in there. I'll talk about this more on the 5th, but I'm just throwing that out there. So on National Watermelon Day, I would bring in watermelon. I do watermelon slushies all day, and it was super duper fun. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the outside of the box stuff, it doesn't have to be just the cliche things too. But again, you need to have that planned ahead of time to really like market and deliver it well. You're making me think of, here's the one that we did. It was while we owned the last studio, the province that we were in added in Family Day. It was the last province in Canada to do it. Every other province had a Family Day in February, and we didn't. So they added it in. So kind of it hadn't really caught on that it was a thing. So we just quadrupled down on it. And it actually got us in a little bit of trouble because I went and rented one of the bouncy castles that's like a gauntlet. You like go in, you got to make it through all the swinging stuff and like the spires sticking up or whatever, right? So we rented one of those and we put it in the studio between the entrance and the room. So the only way to get into the hot room was to make it through the gauntlet. And I thought this is a great idea, but we broke fire code because it blocked all access on every side. And I didn't really think about when you're sweaty coming out of a hot yoga class and you're 80, how hard it is to get through a gauntlet. So then we had to have someone there like helping people through it the whole time. They were all good sports, like it worked out really fun. But as ridiculous as that is, because that was pre-planned and we actually executed on it well, that became like an internal conversation for years after that. Even when the second year that the fire department phoned us and was like, "You're not putting that stupid bounce castle in there, are you?" And I said, "No." And then of course they double checked. So luckily we didn't, but yeah, pre-planning on the whole thing. All right. What else do we have? Anything else to add for today's roundup, team?
I wanted to add a quick comment on what you were talking about, Josh, because I'm a big proponent for planning ahead. That's always, I always do that. That's one of my things. But so you had mentioned a couple of the benefits is it removes a layer of stress because you're not doing things at the last minute. And then also you're able to do more because you're more organized and your time is more prioritized and things like that. But one of my favorite things too about planning ahead for things is you have time to think through all of the little nuances, and these things end up being more successful. So if you're setting up something at the last minute, some kind of bingo challenge or something, you just throw it together at the last minute and then something goes sideways because you set up this pricing option wrong and you didn't have time to think through, oh, it's not going to work this way. And if you have it ahead of time, then you have time to let everything percolate over a period of time. And then you think of, oh, I should set this up this way. It will work better. And you can go back to the project, tweak something, and then let it sit again. And then you have time to do this multiple times and tweak plans multiple times and make things better. And it's all because you started planning ahead. It's kind of the same effect that if you have a teacher training or any kind of event, the first year it's okay, the next year it's even better, the next year it's even better, you keep refining. Well, you do that refining even before you have the first event because you have time to do it.
Totally.
So
yeah, well said. And sometimes I think you can't refine until you start moving forward, right? Like you don't realize what to refine or what to tweak or how to make it even better until you're doing it. So if you don't start early, then you don't
get in it.
Yeah, you don't have the ability to do that. So go ahead, Alex.
So I was going to say along the same lines, but for those who are listening, not everybody loves to plan, right? It's not
Totally.
not everyone opened a yoga studio so they could plan and be forecasting their budget and all this stuff at the time. That's not why they
That's not why you open your studio. You were like,
right.
You were planning.
Right. I'm just really into time management. So I think one of the things is taking that first step, right? And each year that you do your forecast or your plan for your events or what have you in your marketing, it will become easier. But going back to like developing a system to start tracking. So if you have, you're the owner, there's two owners, let's say, and some front desk or an assistant manager or what have you, having some system to collect the ideas, right? Because to your point, Josh, a lot of times it's, 2 weeks before Leprechaun Day or whatever, and you're like, oh, what are we going to do? Put it, instead, if you're just moving towards getting more organized and getting more planning, having a tracking sheet, having a communication between your staff where the ideas go, right? And so when you do get to fourth quarter and you're planning for the next year, there's a place to start, because a lot of times, owners are really busy, staff's really busy, and it all comes out, it's all reactive. So A, start somewhere, take a first step, develop a communication and a tracking sheet, and B, know that by starting somewhere and getting next year, even if it's just 5 events next year, you're going to make the next year 10 events. It's going to be that much easier. It gets easier with practice, right? And leverage
100%.
technology to track all your ideas.
Yeah, I love that. It's an important call out. Just perpetually just have a space for you to put down ideas from you or your team is a good idea. And one comment you just made that I would add to, and on this marketing planning day, this will be part of the subject matter too. But in theory, if you do 4 events, 1 a quarter only, but they just rock it, like you just knock it out of the park, that will reap more rewards than you doing 12 events. So it doesn't have to be like super high volume necessarily either. And in fact, there's a few studios that I've worked with throughout the years and still do that's probably the biggest issue they've encountered is they have too many things going on. So there's too much overlap of communication. There's it becomes noise. So it's funny to go in and work with the studio like that and say, this is cool, but we're going to cancel half of the events you're doing because there's actually too many. You're burning out your customers in terms of their participation. So their enthusiasm is too low. So a little bit of a counter thought, but you bring it up. 5 events, 10 events, doesn't matter what is within your capacity, but having that plan will help you identify that. So cool. All right, you guys, I think that's it for today, unless we have any monumental thoughts to add in at this point. Okay, stay tuned. We will be launching on our Black Friday stuff. We've never done any Black Friday deals ever in the history of the YC or me prior to the YC ever. This year, there will be a couple of cool ones for you. So that's launching pretty much today or tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. More importantly, and equally as importantly, the marketing day, December 5th, mark it in your calendar. And that will be launched and you'll be able to RSVP to that and sign up for it to dial in for a day, your entire marketing plan for 2023. So stay tuned for that one as well.
And if you're thinking, man, this is just all overwhelming, I don't know where to start, book a discovery call with any of the coaches because we can help you get started to the path where this stuff becomes it becomes smooth and efficient for you.
And
so
empowering, right?
And empowered. So you're empowered. Your business you're empowered within your business. If you're feeling like you're always running behind the 8 ball, getting in front of it can feel like such a huge relief. So
huge weight off your shoulders. I've got to share this little story, Terry, on that note to send us off.
Okay.
I have an ever-growing document. I think it's 100 pages deep at this point, where I'm just writing down my ideas, or what about this, or we could do that, or this event, this, or whatever else. And I've been doing that for a long time. And then randomly, I shared them with Jenna. She's the unfortunate person who gets to be my sounding board for this stuff half of the time. And most of them, she's just like, get out of here. So one of the more recent ones is it's probably still a year ago or something, said maybe the name of things should be non-sexy consulting. And it's because I realized whenever I hire a coach or a consultant to work with me, it's for the thing that's not sexy in my mind. It's for the thing that I'm like, we got to figure out how to get this whatever the thing is I don't like to do, and I'm like, I want the easier button for it, and I need the accountability from someone, and I'm feeling overwhelmed around it. It's not the sexy fun thing I want to do during the day. I immediately go find a consultant that specializes in that specifically. So to your point, if you're listening to all this and you're like, I don't know about this organizational stuff, don't worry, we got you. We love organizing your business and can do it. So we won't change the name to non-sexy consulting, but you get the picture. Cool. All right, friends, have a great weekend. Kay's not here, so go do some yoga, and we'll talk to you again soon.